If your past still finds you, no matter how far you've moved from it, this is the story of the one man who built the room it couldn't get into. In 1922, a doctor in his late 40s bought a strip of shoreline on Lake Zurich that most of his own colleagues never learned the address of. The next year, with his own hands, he started laying stone. No electricity, no running water, and he kept adding to that tower for the rest of his life. Room by room for over 30 years, he never once called it finished. That is not what a vacation home looks like. That is what it looks like when someone is building something to survive something. And the question this video answers is what he was protecting inside those walls, and why it took a world-famous doctor 3 decades to feel safe. Because the thing he was hiding from could not be locked out. It was already inside. Go back with me to the beginning, years before the tower. Long before he was famous, a young psychiatrist in Zurich became fascinated by a small, almost embarrassing kind of moment. The word that slips out that you never meant to say. The name that vanishes at the exact second you go to introduce someone. The laugh that arrives at a funeral. The cough that shows up only during the quietest bar of the concert. Little hijackings, where for a moment, something other than you seems to be doing the steering. Most people wave those off as random. Jung refused to. He spent years cataloguing them, in his patients and quietly in himself, and he grew certain they were not accidents. They were the surface tracks of something living further down, something that wanted things of its own. His name was Carl Jung, and he gave that something a name that has gone soft from overuse since, though he meant it precisely. He called it a complex, and he reached for an older, heavier word to describe what it is like to be run by one. For centuries, he pointed out, when a person was quietly governed by a piece of themselves they could neither see nor command, nobody called it a complex. They called it possession. Then he began to feel it working in himself, the moods that rolled in from nowhere, the reactions that landed a size too big for the moment that set them off. And that is a hard thing to sit with, to spend your days naming the hidden thing that steers everyone else, and then feel that same hidden hand reach into your own life. For years, that discomfort had somewhere to go. His name was Sigmund Freud, mentor, father figure, the most famous mind in the field, and the man who had already named Jung his likely successor. As long as Jung stayed inside Freud's framework, his own unfinished material had a container, a theory that explained it, a relationship that held it, a place to set it down that was not himself. So, he had every reason not to look at it directly. Why would you open a locked room in your own house when the man you admire most keeps telling you the house is fine? But holding something at arm's length only works for exactly as long as the arm holds. And in Jung's case, the arm was Freud. By 1913 it was over. The two men broke, completely and bitterly, and Jung walked away from the role that had defined him in public for years. Here is how he described the season that followed, in his own words. The parting from Freud, he wrote, began a period of inner uncertainty. It would be no exaggeration to call it a state of disorientation. I felt totally suspended in midair, for I had not yet found my own footing. No mentor, no framework, nothing standing between him and the material anymore. Therefore, the room he had been avoiding for a decade did not disappear when the container did. It just stopped having anywhere else to go, but straight through him. The thing he had spent years measuring in his patients was now loose in the one person he could never send home at the end of the session. This is not really a video about Carl Jung's biography. It is about a mechanism, and the mechanism has nothing to do with fame or genius. It is about a room in the mind that never got a door built into the present, so it stays lit, and stays waiting, no matter how far you move away from it or how numb you make yourself. What I call the unfinished room. Jung matters here for exactly one reason. He is the one person on record who went into that room and built it out, room by room, for the rest of his life. Sanctuary was never a wall. It was always a room. Some nights the screen is the wrong place for this. If you'd rather just listen, Surreal Mind is on Spotify now. The words "in the dark," wherever you are. Links in the description. Because that room does not close on its own. Something has to happen to it. Here is what happened inside Jung's. The years after the break were not one event. They were a long stretch, and by his own account a frightening one. He wrote that he lived, in his words, as if under constant inner pressure, strong enough that he sometimes suspected there was a genuine disturbance in his own mind. Visions arrived, images he could not explain pushed up from underneath in the daytime while he was wide awake. And here is where he did the thing almost no one in his position would risk. Instead of shoving the images back down, he let them run. He sat with them, followed where they went, and wrote down everyone, whether or not it made any sense yet. He would later give that practice a name: active imagination. In the moment, it looked to his colleagues like a respected physician quietly coming apart. Some of them said exactly that, out loud. So he was not surrounded by allies. His reputation was turning against him. The establishment that had once seen him as its future had no framework for what he was doing, and no patience for it. What he did have was his wife, Emma, who stayed, and one stubborn discipline. Write it down every time and trust that the meaning would arrive later, even when it felt like recording your own breakdown in a notebook. And it did arrive. He spent the rest of his career formalizing the thing he had lived through, and the clinical language he landed on is colder and far more precise than any version you have heard since. He put it in a phrase that still unsettles people a century later. Complexes, he wrote, can have us. Their very existence, he said, throws serious doubt on the naive assumption of the unity of consciousness. A complex sits inside you and behaves, in his exact phrase, like an animated foreign body in the sphere of consciousness. A foreign body, something lodged in you that is not quite you and moves on its own. He even traced where it comes from. The origin, he wrote, is frequently a trauma, an emotional shock that splits off a piece of the psyche and drives it underground, where it keeps its full charge and waits. If you have ever heard yourself snap at someone you love in a voice that did not feel like yours, and stood there afterward wondering where that came from, you have already met the foreign body. You have felt the split-off piece take the wheel for a second. Comment: I didn't realize how long that room had been lit. And if this is putting language to something you have carried for years without a word for it, subscribe. This channel exists to hand you the word. Now, here is what makes this more than a historical footnote, because Jung was not the last person to find this room. He was one of the first. More than 80 years later, an entirely different field arrived at the same place from the opposite direction. The trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk showed, in 1994, that the nervous system can lock onto a fear response and store it in the body's own sensory memory, so that an ordinary, harmless, present-day cue gets read as danger, long after the danger itself is gone. A few years after that, Peter Levine gave that exact wiring a name. Traumatic coupling, a neutral thing in the present, welded to an old alarm. 3 names, 2 separate centuries, 1 discovery. The past does not need your address to find you, because it was never chasing you across time or distance to begin with. It has been sitting inside the whole time, in a room you never finished. waiting for something in the present to walk past and flip the switch. A song, a tone of voice, the particular way the light falls on a certain kind of afternoon, and suddenly you are 7 years old again in a grown adult's body, and you cannot for the life of you explain why. So, what do you actually do with a room like that? Freud's answer had been to interpret it, to explain it into submission from the outside. Jung's answer turned out to be stranger and physical, and it started, of all places, with a memory of being a child. In the middle of the worst of it, he made a choice that sounds almost like giving up. He decided, since he knew nothing at all, to simply do whatever occurred to him. He stopped steering his own mind, and the very first thing that floated up was a memory from when he was 10 or 11 years old, playing for hours on end, building little houses and castles out of stones, with mud for mortar. He felt, in his own words, that there was still life in it, that the small boy who built things was somehow still in there, holding a kind of creative aliveness. The grown, disoriented man had lost somewhere along the way, so he did the thing that sounds absurd for a world-famous psychiatrist in the middle of a crisis to do. He started to build, for real, with real stone on real land. In 1922, he bought the land at Bollingen, old church ground on the upper lake, and years later, he was completely explicit about what it actually was. He had needed, he wrote, to make a representation in stone of his innermost thoughts. I had to make a confession of faith in stone. Sit with that word, confession. He chose it on purpose, and he meant it literally, a confession laid down in rock, where he would have to live with it every day. A place to stop merely surviving the material and start meeting it on purpose, in the open, in daylight, with his hands busy and his mind finally quiet. Because you cannot argue an unfinished room out of existence, and you cannot outrun it either. Therefore, he did the only thing left. He built the room a door, and he walked in. Here is the part every telling of this story skips past in a single sentence. Building that tower was not restful, and it was not a charming rustic retreat. This was the most demanding, sustained stretch of his adult life, and he arranged it that way on purpose, stripped of every comfort that might have let him look away from exactly what he had gone there to face. No electricity, no running water. He pumped from the well by hand. He chopped the wood. He tended the fire and cooked his own food alone for long stretches with no one else there at all. And he wrote one of the quietest, most piercing lines in the whole account about it. These simple acts make man simple, and how difficult it is to be simple. Sit inside that sentence for a moment. A man who could read the deepest hidden patterns in other people's minds discovered that the single most difficult thing in the world was to stand in a bare stone room, doing nothing but chopping wood, with no theory to hide behind, and nothing at all between him and his own material. There is no distraction out there, no inbox, no audience, just the fire, the water, the stone, and the parts of himself that only come out when the room finally goes quiet. He built a small retiring room inside one of the towers, and he kept the only key on his own body. No one else was allowed in without his permission, not even his family, and read that correctly, because it is the whole secret. He did not build a private room to shut people out of his life. He built it to keep one appointment, over and over, with the parts of himself that only surfaced once everything else was stripped away. This is the moment it could have broken him. He was alone, by choice, with the exact thing most people spend a lifetime and a fortune arranging never to feel. There was nothing left to interpret, nowhere left to run, no mentor to hand it to. He had removed every buffer deliberately, so this was the closest he ever came to losing the very thing he was trying to save. And a viewer would be right to wonder, at this exact point in the story, whether a man can walk into that room on purpose and come back out intact. But he did not run, and he did not break. He stayed in the room, and slowly, over seasons and then years, the thing he had gone there to meet stopped arriving as an ambush and started arriving as a conversation. That is the hinge the whole story turns on. The material never went away. He simply stopped being afraid to be in the room with it. What he walked out with was something more durable than relief. It was a method and eventually a name for it, borrowed from the ancient world. The Greeks had a word, temenos, for a piece of ground marked off and set apart, a sacred precinct with a boundary drawn around it. Jung took that word and moved it inside the psyche. The temenos, he wrote, is the sacred precinct where all the split-off parts of the personality are united. Now hold that up against everything you just heard. The complex was a split-off fragment, a piece broken loose and running on its own. And his cure was a strange one. He built a space bounded enough and safe enough that the broken-off pieces could finally come back in and be met without blowing the whole house apart. That is the entire thing. That is what I call the working sanctuary, a space strong enough to hold what you have been running from, so it can stop running you. The cost of it was real. He never fully returned to the establishment that once called him its heir. He came out of that tower a different kind of thinker, permanently, and in some ways a lonelier one. But he came out standing, and he came out whole, and nearly everything the world now knows him for was forged in that stone room by the water. There is a specific set of small rituals Jung repeated at Bollingen every single day. The fire, the water, the wood, the exact order he did them in, that this video does not have room to do justice. That is its own video, and it is linked at the end. And here is the part that matters most, and gets left out most often. He did not build the tower once and stop. He kept coming back to it for the rest of his life. 4 years after the first tower, in 1927, he added a central structure. 4 years after that, in 1931, he extended it and built that private retiring room with the key. In 1935, he added a courtyard and a loggia out by the lake. 4 separate building phases, spread across 12 years, until the whole thing had grown into 4 connected parts. Jung himself called the finished shape a quaternity and a symbol of psychic wholeness. Later, Jungian writers looked at that 4-part, centered structure and gave it a name he never used for it himself. They called it an architectural mandala, a mandala you could walk into and live inside. And notice the rhythm of it. Every few years, the same feeling would return, that the building still did not say everything, that something was still missing. So he would build again, because the unfinished room does not get solved once and stay solved. Therefore, the work of meeting it never actually ends. It only changes shape. This is what I call the return work, and it is the single biggest correction this video makes to the version of healing you have been handed everywhere else. You know the other version by heart. Go cold, go numb, become untouchable, become unreachable, build the wall high enough and the past can't climb it. But that is the one move Jung never made. He had learned the hard way that sealing the pieces out is exactly what kept them running him. So he spent 30 years building something that could finally let them back in, on his terms, in daylight, 1 room at a time. In 1950, for his 75th birthday, Jung carved a stone cube by hand and set it outside the tower like an explanation of the whole place. On one face, he cut an inscription, taken, in his own words, from alchemy. It begins, I am an orphan, alone. Nevertheless, I am found everywhere. I am one, but opposed to myself. I am youth and old man at one and the same time. One thing opposed to itself. Youth and old man at once. The split-off pieces, named on a stone and set into the ground, no longer loose in the dark. Accounted for. Home. And then life asked him the last hard question it had left. In 1955, his wife Emma died. And that same year, grieving in his 80s, he reached for the only thing he had ever truly known how to do with something too large to carry. He built. He added an upper story to the low central section of the tower. The part he had slowly come to understand was himself. He wrote that earlier in life, he could never have done it, that he would have felt it was arrogant, presumptuous. Now, he wrote, it signified an extension of consciousness achieved in old age. And with that, he said, the building was complete. 33 years, a crisis, a marriage, a burial, a life. And every single time the material came back for him, at every age and every kind of grief, his answer was the same one from 1923, another room. So go all the way back to the question we opened on. What was he protecting inside those walls for all those years? It was never other people he was keeping out. It was the unfinished rooms in himself, and he was guarding one thing above all else: his right to meet them on his own schedule, instead of being ambushed by them on theirs. And at the end of it, he wrote a single sentence about that place that I would set above any diagnosis in his entire life's work. At Bollingen, he said, he was in the midst of his true life, most deeply himself. And now it comes to you because you do not need land on a lake in Switzerland, and you do not need to learn stonework. You need the same thing he needed. Somewhere the material that keeps reactivating in you finally gets met on purpose, instead of ambushing you in a meeting, in an argument you did not mean to start, at 2 a.m, for no reason you can name. The past was never following you through time. It has been sitting quietly in a room you never finished building, and you do not solve a room like that by bricking it up. You go in and you finish it. Sanctuary was never a wall. It was always a room. So be honest with yourself for a second, because this is the part that actually matters. Which part of this are you standing in right now? Still in the ordinary world, telling yourself the room isn't even lit. Right at the threshold, out of excuses, with no one left to hold the material for you the way Freud once held it for him. Deep in the ordeal, alone with the thing, wondering whether staying in the room is going to break you before it changes you, or already doing the return work, coming back to it, adding another room. Comment, which one? Just the honest one, not the one that sounds good. And if you want to keep going, the video on the daily rituals Jung used to stay inside that sanctuary, the fire, the water, the wood, is right there waiting for you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.